In this episode of the Orange Nerd Show, we are talking about those Pixar layoffs that were announced yesterday. Crazy news there. We're also going to talk about Disney PR and how pretty bad it's been lately. We're going to break that down up next. We got Jay Shear and the Italiano on this episode of the Orange Nerd Show. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of the Orange Nerd Show, where we talk about everything except the theme parks. We talk about the studio stuff, the streaming stuff, the corporate side, everything except the theme parks, because there is so much to dive into outside of that theme park world. But before we get started, I want to introduce my fantastic panel. George, the Italiano. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be back on. And I've been very curious to talk about the topics that we're discussing tonight, because it's there's some as I say it in my world, very sticky indeed.
Yeah, and I see you got a little friend behind you, a little rabbit.
I do. Yes, I do. Oswald, he's joining the party, so he's ready to play that banjo.
Nice. If you could let everybody home know where they can find you on social media, George.
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There we go. You're chimed in. I got a new Nintendo drop. I'm excited. Jay Shear is on the show with us, host of the Story Geeks on the channel. He also has his own YouTube channel called How Stories Work. Make sure you check that out. He's also the director of No Vacancy. Jay's in the house. Welcome back, sir.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. You've got a new fade going on the side. I'm liking that. Oh my gosh, the best hair in the Disney game over here with OG, dude.
Let's go.
Yeah, it's fun to be here. Not necessarily fun topics today, unfortunately, because there's people's lives who are going to be affected. Yeah. But we'll try and break it down, and we'll try and be supportive, but also realistic with what's happening over at Disney. And it's always fun to join you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into. Actually, I gotta chime you in, Jay. I'm sorry. There we go. Let's dive into the topics at hand. Yeah, this is crazy news. So this is from TechCrunch.com. They're actually the ones who broke this story. But as Disney pushes towards streaming profitability, Pixar to undergo layoffs in 2024. So it says here, the Disney-owned animation studio Pixar is poised to undergo layoffs this year. TechCrunch has learned, and the company confirmed. So this isn't just a rumor. This has been confirmed. It says here that the studio stressed the layoffs are not imminent, but will take place later this year as Pixar focuses on making less content. And according to insiders, the Pixar layoffs include a headcount that was hired for Disney Plus. Hires that Disney pushed on Pixar to produce for its streaming division, which hasn't yet turned a profit. Jay, I'll start with you, brother. Like, what are your thoughts on this? This is kind of interesting news.
It is interesting news. I don't feel like it should be surprising news, if I'm being honest. And the reason I say that is because we know that animation at Disney, it has had a pretty rough, let's call it 4-year period, right? Like maybe 3-year period if you want to be a little bit more generous. They've been all over the place with their box office. It has not been consistent. Pixar has had a bunch of films go straight to Disney Plus. Disney Plus, we know, is a giant loser in terms of profitability. It has not made profit yet. Getting closer. They expect, I think they said in this article, they expect to be profitable by the end of the year. That's probably an if as opposed to a when. And so what do you got to do? You got to look at, okay, well, how much money can we make off the things that we're doing? And what does it cost us to produce what we're producing? And when you're seeing other studios produce movies that are competing with what a Pixar might compete with. We just saw Migration, for example. I think the budget on Migration was like 90 million or something like that.
Yeah.
You're talking about Pixar movies with a $200 million budget. To put it in perspective, the amount of money you need to make on top of what Migration needs to make is a lot. There's a big delta there. It's not just the production budget, it's also whatever goes into marketing, and it's a factor of all of those things because you're going to split some of that revenue with the theaters. So to me, it feels a little bit more inevitable because basically, if you were to break it down into like, let's just talk about widgets, for example, and do a business exercise, and you were to say, okay, well, if I'm only ever going to make $10 off my widgets because that's all people will pay to go buy my widgets, and if it costs me $8 to make that widget, and I only make $2 in profit, and that doesn't even include my marketing costs and things like that, and I lose money on it, if I can make the same widget for $3, $2, and I have that extra margin to play with, it's going to be a much better financial situation for me. And so this is probably far more of a financial decision than it is a creative one. But you referenced the fact that this article talked about it being Disney Plus staff, and so excuse me, getting over bronchitis, so I may cough. Try to mute myself. But we might be seeing is Disney saying, all the animation stuff from Pixar is quality enough that it needs to go into theaters more often, and we don't want to do all of this Disney Plus rigmarole type of thing, and they're just trying to take some of that stuff away too. Whatever the case, it does impact the profitability of Pixar films, and this does seem like a no-brainer to me based on how bloated those budgets have become.
Yeah, no, 100%, Jay, because it's like, we've heard for, I don't know, a long time now, Disney has got to get the budgets down on their films, not just animation, but even their live action and what have you. And I feel like everyone's kind of on board with that. Mm-hmm. But then they announce, well, okay, we're going to cut. We're going to start laying off and things like that, which suck, but that's part of the budget. That's part of getting these budgets lower, is having less staff, unfortunately. So this is the kind of the ugly reality of getting the budgets lower. Good friend of the channel, Alia, I believe I think she heard it from Matt Bellani, where Disney's really the only studio right now producing animation like in the U.S. A big part of the reason why Illumination and these other animation studios are able to do it at such a cheaper cost is because they outsource a lot of their stuff overseas. Now, here's the thing: I don't like anyone to lose their job, but these animation houses, both Disney and Pixar, are legendary studios. It would be an absolute sin to have Disney Animation that's been here in Burbank for 100 years or whatever, it's been, or at least in California for 100 years. It would be a sin to uplift that and have it go overseas. I think most people would agree with that. Same with Pixar. They've been in Emeryville, I think, since its birth. So look, I mean, there's no good decisions here when you're cutting. But at the same time, it's like, I think they have to look at what they have and sort of make the least bad decision. So it's like, okay, this sucks big time, and my heart goes out to every single person that lost their job. But it's probably not as bad as if you had to uproot the entire studio and ship it overseas. So it's a balancing act for sure. And again, my heart goes out to everybody. I mean, I don't want to see anyone lose their job, but when budgets are bloated and you're looking to save money, also this Disney Plus thing, they said a chunk of this is these Disney Plus hires that they kind of, in the article they said kind of forced upon Pixar. So it's not even necessarily a budget thing, which it is, but it's also kind of like trimming the fat, because Iger has said many times, we're going to focus on quality over quantity. So I think the Disney Plus hires that went into Pixar were about churning stuff out like on the regular. And if you're going to have a new kind of mission statement here where it's like, we're going to do less, you don't necessarily need all those heads in there doing all that. So it's interesting play here. But what do you think, George, in terms of these layoffs? What does it mean for Pixar? What does it mean for even Disney animation?
Well, first off, I just have to say, Jay, I loved your widget analogy. I picked up on it just took me back to the 1986 film Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield. Absolutely loved it. but I digress. So a couple factors here. When Disney Plus started launching, it was like right in the peak of prime of like where streaming was becoming a thing, and then here's 2020 coming, everything gets shut down, so they had to rely on this streaming service for them to get by, which thankfully it came on board when it did. So to hire all these new people or transfer people over to a certain department with Disney Plus, Disney had to do what they had to do. Now that things are up and running again, theaters are open, they're trying to get things back, and they still have these job positions that are not really necessarily needed, in my opinion, to the degree of when it was needed in 2020. And it's unfortunate because, a lot of people look at it as a job, but then at the same time it's like, well, what's connected to that job? It's a person's livelihood, so you always have to look at it that, and it's a horrible thing, but at the end of the day, Disney is a corporate business, and they have to do what's best for the company. Otherwise, losing just X amount of people instead of Y amount of people, in that sense, where it's like a bigger volume of layoffs if, God forbid, knock on wood, anything else was to go down. Having said that, just speaking into the terms of Pixar was on a winning streak since the very beginning back in 1995 with Toy Story. I mean, they had hit after hit after hit. It was lightning in a bottle for them every single time. And they must have been trudging their shoes on carpet to get hit by lightning how many times, with that. So I feel like they just got to a point of how Disney animation got to a point where it's like you have stale moments, so to speak, and it could be from many different factors of what makes a film not do well with financial numbers. It could be marketing, it could be promoting, it could be not good storyline, it could be over budget, and this is where Disney and Pixar have to kind of get a grip on and kind of break everything down in layers to really see what is the problem. And it just seems like it keeps on turning back to the budgeting for profitability. It's just the numbers are way too high, to the fact of where, for instance, a new Pixar movie now is the budget of what Cars made back in 2006, that made a profit just in the US alone. Right. And now that's become the budget. So that's crazy that you have to double that amount just to make a profit.
Well, and this is the thing too. Disney got real comfortable. They were the hit maker for the longest time. Like pre-Pandy, they were hitting like $1 billion movies, like pretty much like every time out the gate almost, right? Like everything coming out the gate was like $1 billion film, and they were getting used to that, right? So these bloated budgets, it was like, yeah, it's high, but we'll make our money back, Then the Pandy hit, and this whole thing got shifted, and now it's a whole new world, basically. Your favorite song, George, Whole New World. But now it's a whole new world, and now they're dealing with a whole different set of circumstances. So I think that is kind of interesting. Now they have to kind of adjust this and go, okay, now we're not in 2019 anymore. We're not in 2017 anymore. These movies aren't guaranteed to make $1 billion in the box office. We got to adjust these budgets, and unfortunately, the way to do that is from stuff like this. Now, there's a fair argument out there, and I think this is kind of interesting. At this town hall, Bob Iger, he said here, this is back, I think it was like in November. He said here, today we are focused on driving profitable growth and value creation as we move from a period of fixing to a new era of building. We have a strong balance sheet, and we expect free cash flow to significantly improve in fiscal 24, approaching pre-COVID levels. And there's a fair argument here with this statement where it says, as we move from a period of fixing to a new era of building. So the argument is basically like, look, I mean, Iger was kind of saying like, we're kind of done with the fixing. Now we're building. And these layoffs sort of indicate maybe they're still fixing, right? It's a little bit of semantics here. Jay, what are your thoughts on this? And then I'll kind of chime in on this. Like, do you feel like we're still in that era of fixing? Do you feel like this is sort of maybe word games with Bob Iger? Where do we stand with this whole fixing versus building thing?
Yeah, it's almost like a good segue into the PR conversation, but we're not going to go there yet. Couple things to think about. One of the things that people a lot smarter than me trained me on when I was back in the corporate environment was that they would say, and I use this in my startup experience as well. They would say there's 3 factors that you need to consider when you're in leadership and you're trying to get a feel for like where your marketing dollars should go, what kind of products you should be putting out in the marketplace. Those 3 factors are: what are the desired what are the customer desires, right? What are the customer needs, what are the problems they're experiencing, what do they want to pay for? So however the customer is thinking about your product or service or products or services in the marketplace. The second one is the marketplace. What's the marketplace doing? How is the marketplace shifting? How is the marketplace changing? And the third one is, what's the competition doing? And how is the competition moving and shaping different things as well? So if you take those 3 like legs of the stool, so to speak, right? You can basically take every single one of those legs and they've all fallen apart like with the pandemic, right? Customer needs and desires completely changed. The marketplace changed drastically year over year. I mean, it went from being like, we're all in theaters having a great time to all of a sudden we're all at home to all of a sudden we're back sort of in theaters again. And then no one knows what that looks like. The marketplace is fairly vague in terms of what's happening. And then you have the competition, and the competition is trying a bunch of different things, and competition's somewhat successful in some areas and then a total disaster in others, just like Disney. So if you're Disney and you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, well, our customers have changed what their desired results are and what they want from us, and we're not sure what that looks like. The marketplace is still figuring itself out. Disney went from, if we get in a time machine and we go back just a little ways, Disney launches Disney Plus, and what was it, the next year or maybe a year and a half later, investors decided, you know what? We're no longer focused on the growth of streaming services. We're now focused on the profitability of streaming services. And what had Disney just done? They had dumped millions upon millions of dollars into the growth of their streaming service, and then Wall Street turns around and goes, yeah, we want profitability right now. You go, well, I just dumped a lot of money in that I'm not going to be able to recoup with subscribers for years to come. And so now I think what we're seeing Disney go, so here's Bob Iger's comment: we need to fix things, and then we need to grow. Now what that reads to me is, a lot of times a business will say, if all 3 of those legs of the stool have fallen apart, we don't know what the core business looks like anymore. We're not exactly sure how to do business the right way. Do we even have the infrastructure built correctly for what's coming next, what's coming down the road? So, of course, the fixing part of that to me says we're trying to build this stool back up, get a really good understanding of our customers, get a really good understanding of the marketplace, see what competitors are doing, and then operate well and build upon that once we've kind of seen that. The problem is that is not it's not a step 1, step 2. It's
right.
a gray continuum of like, okay, this is not working the way that we thought it was. We got to divert interest from there to here. And I think that that's what they're basically doing. So is that statement like a gotcha, Bob, you don't know what you're doing? I would not bet against Bob in this regard. And the people who are betting against Bob don't have the experience to bet against Bob. So sorry about that. But like, I think now, granted, I don't think that Bob Iger has handled his return to Disney in the best way possible. So this is not me saying like everyone in Bob we trust, like this is going to be amazing. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is there's a lot going on behind the scenes at Disney that we are not privy to. And we see what he says in public. What he says in public, we'll talk about this in PR. It hasn't been phenomenal. And so for me, I just think this is the normal course of business. And this is how businesses operate. And this is not, it shouldn't be surprising. The clarification that it's mostly about Disney Plus makes even more sense. I feel really sorry for those people and having to see that their livelihoods have to change and shift. Hopefully they'll go, maybe a bunch of them will start their own streaming service or start their own creative agency and do amazing. I hope so. But that's my take. I don't think this is like, if you want to get semantics about it, you can, but I don't think that that's worth it, to be honest.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, this stuff it's not going to be a straight line. And I think you kind of mentioned that, right? There's going to be, I think the period, and here's the thing. Bob Iger's statement, he kind of makes it sound like what you were saying, Jay, like step one, step two. And I think that's where the PR, and we'll talk about that, that's where the PR and the messaging is off, right?
Yep.
Because it seems like, okay, the fixing is completely done, and now we're going to do this thing over here. Now we're going to build. But in reality, the fixing and the building is more tied together in that gray area, like you were saying. You're going to have like these ebbs and flows along the way. It's a series of both things.
Yep.
You're gonna cut, and you're going to build. You're going to cut, and you're going to build, and that's how you sort of move forward. Yep. So yeah, I think that the actions that we're seeing from Disney are consistent with that. Bob's wording could have been better, but what they're doing, I mean, is it really that much of a shock that we're getting layoffs at Pixar when we've been told from Iger many times we're focusing on quality over quantity? I mean, if you listen to that, it's a no-brainer. They're going to cut. They're not making as much content, so they don't need as many people.
And we're seeing the receipts on that with the box office, with the Pixar films. As much as I absolutely love Elemental, it did have legs, But again, I think with Elemental, that was a cross promotion marketing issue that they didn't utilize as they do many of the other Pixar movies. I think that's what ended up hurting that film. But it's best to face the issue head on, that as much as we don't like to see anyone losing their job, especially now, it's horrible, but at least we're seeing a somewhat of a turnaround, that Disney is making moves to fix the issue. And sometimes you have to kind of trudge through the mud in the beginning to get out of it, to start walking on that grassy patch, so to speak. And I think too, with Nelson Peltz and the board situation, Disney is trying every outlet, so to speak, to try to get things maneuvered before they have to then deal with that situation, to see, because they have one last shot before, I mean, they had so many chances where Nelson Peltz and Perlmutter is like going in and out and in and out, and it's like, so now this is their last shot, in my opinion.
And I'm glad you brought up Peltz, because our friend of the channel, Alia, she's amazing. She's absolutely brilliant. I want to give her credit. But she mentioned, we were talking privately, and she mentioned Peltz, and she was saying, like, look, if you support Peltz, I mean, what do you think he's going to do when he gets in there? If he gets in there, I mean, he's going to cut even deeper. Yeah, I mean, you're going to get layoffs, believe me, if he gets in there, or he's at least at the very minimum going to advocate for them. I mean, he only has a seat or two on the board, theoretically, if he makes it. But that's what he's looking to do. He's looking to cut even more. That's what he wants from Disney. So this is what's going to happen, I mean, whether Peltz gets in there, whether he doesn't, there's going to be these cuts, and it's a shame. It's absolutely a shame, because when we talk about budgets and stuff as a fan community, or even like the Hollywood insiders and what have you, it feels like a separate thing. But behind the budgets are real people. Right. People that depend on this job, and that's the heartbreaking thing, is that once we start to dive into the details of cutting these budgets, that's when stuff like this occurs, and that's when you start to lose people and stuff. So it's sad. It's sad all around. But I agree with you, gentlemen. It's really not that surprising, and it's sort of a necessary evil at this point, because I mean, what else are you going to do? The company has to get back on track financially. We hopefully can avoid taking these jobs overseas. Something's got to give here, so we'll see. But
I did say earlier, I said that, Bob Iger I don't think he's making bad decisions in this regard, but I will say this. I had a really smart supervisor one time, and we went through layoffs together. We had to be the ones that did the layoffs, right? Oh. And it was brutal. I've been laid off myself. It sucks, right? And it's much more a common thing these days than it was. We have a much more volatile corporate landscape than we did. You'd have people that had jobs back in the day for like 40 years, right?
Right.
Like who do you know that's had a job for 40 years? Like the longest job I've held is like 7 years, and that was like a miracle that it was 7 years. And so I think that this guy said to me one time, shout out to Henry. He said, layoffs are always the fault of leadership. And what he meant was, what he was saying was that when when leadership does not identify that three-legged stool that I talked about, and they take their eyes off the prize, they don't really know where things are going. They make decisions about where they think things are going, but then things turn in another direction that they weren't expecting. That is a mistake of foresight, a mistake of vision into where the industry is headed. Now, you could argue that sometimes like it's something like a pandemic is pretty difficult to predict, right? But you could also criticize Bob Iger for being like, oh, there's a pandy coming. I'm out. I'll just have someone else come in. So I don't think we can just what I'm not saying is we should just let Bob Iger off the hook, right? No. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say like, well, where did the problems come up? What decisions are being made now that those problems are being dealt with, and then how do we move forward from here? And I don't see another way of them moving forward. And it sucks for the people who will get laid off, but it makes, like you said, OG, it makes all the sense in the world. So our hearts go out to the CMs who are going to get laid off. But like I said, they might go on to do something way better than what they were doing before. So we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And typically that's what happens. It sucks like when you get laid off or you lose your job, but typically what happens is it's short-term pain, but then in the long run you end up finding something better that is better for you or whatever. So usually, and I'm kind of a Pollyanna kind of guy, so that's my mindset, right? If I lose a job or something, I'm like, okay, but that only means there's something better out there for me. You know what I'm saying? And I like to have that mindset, and I like to think the same with these folks that are getting laid off at PIXAR, that they are going to find something better for them. So,
and I'm glad you have a Pollyanna mindset, OG, when it comes to layoffs, because for me, I'm more Goodfellas. It's no one lays off the Italiano.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So let's dive into Disney PR, because Disney PR has been, and Jay, we talked about this on the DMs. Yeah, it's been bad. And I think it's been one of those things where it's like, I think more than even the financials. Yeah, a lot of people focus on the financials. I think the financials are pretty much, they're in the kind of the same boat as the other studios with that. You know what I'm saying? Give or take. But the PR though has been, because all eyes are on Disney, their response to everything, it matters more than like a Comcast or a Paramount or whatever. So what are your thoughts? Set the table a little bit with this Disney PR thing.
I have a lot of thoughts on their PR. Now, for a little bit of context, my day job is in helping people with their marketing, which sometimes gets involved in PR, but I would never call myself a PR expert. Okay. So I'm not assessing this as somebody who's in the PR field so much as somebody who is adjacent to it and having seen what Disney has done for decades with PR and been insanely successful. Right. So if you travel back into the 2010s, as I was saying before, Iger had this amazing PR machine in the 2010s. It was like the way I would describe it, the way I like to describe it, and this is one of the ways I've described it to OG, is that in the 2010s, it felt like Disney was in control of their PR. It felt like Disney was creating the stories that they wanted people to talk about. It felt like Disney would withhold information until it was like, this is the most excited people could be when we release it. Let's release it now. Boom. Oh, yeah. Crazy. We bought Lucasfilm. We're announcing a new Star Wars trilogy, so on and so forth. The parks updates. I mean, you could go in and get parks updates before the major announcements came out in like the Blue Sky areas, like the Blue Sky cellar they had for a while at DCA. Yeah. I mean, you can get some like looks into the future, but they would just do this like trickle thing and then boom, big announcement. Trickle thing, boom, big announcement. And it was almost like hits on just ongoing hits and upon hits upon hits. You rarely heard it get political. If it did get political, it was like not super far to one side. It was just pressing the line a little bit. But when Iger left just before the pandemic, around pandemic timeframe, it suddenly felt like, as opposed to leading and controlling what they were releasing, and remember, when you're in control of it, you can decide what the story is and decide how the story plays out in the marketplace. It feels like now they're reacting to whatever the marketplace is grasping onto, and then they're coming out with their PR afterwards. The first time I saw it and felt uncomfortable with it was when it was just after the George Floyd situation, Black Lives Matter was huge. And for context, just so you know my personal thoughts on this, so we don't get too political, and you think I'm going down one political aspect more than another. I think the Black Lives Matter organization is super troublesome and a giant problem. But the sentiment of the time of saying, why is there not equality amongst the communities that are surrounding us, I liked a lot. I liked that message a lot. I liked getting behind that. So Disney goes in an era where Disney would have said, we're releasing the plans that we're going to do on our timetable. Disney started highlighting the fact that they were turning Splash Mountain into Tiana's and acting like that was a big major like win because Splash Mountain is problematic. And they didn't say those words exactly, but Tiana's is not. And we're like making amends almost, right? So I went, oh, that's weird. Not so much because they announced it, but it's because it was like, are you trying to grift off of what is happening in the public sphere? And like this guy died, and you're like, oh, well, we're gonna change our ride so it makes everything okay. It's like, whoa, that's like a totally. Why are you involved in the social sphere topics? You shouldn't be. Just you're an escape from reality, not an augmentation of, and we don't congratulate you for how great you are at helping us deal with culture. So that was the first time I saw it where I was like, that's weird. That's a weird thing to start highlighting at this point in time.
Right.
And then ever since then, I think I've seen it the most with Star Wars. But it has happened with a lot of the Disney stars as well. When things are under control, it feels like things are very centralized. And it's like all PR runs through a central thing that then distributes and says, this is what we say about this. This is what we say about this. This is what we say about this. When we get into the pandemic era, we start hearing stories like the Andor team says this show is a direct message about not electing Trump, right? Like we get the Rachel Ziegler comments. We get and I don't really care what side of the political spectrum anybody out there is on, and whether or not you like those messages or dislike those messages. I don't care. I literally don't care. The point I'm trying to make is cultural conversation, Disney PR following it, as opposed to Disney has a story that makes you want to be immersed in that story, and it's only talking about that story. Now you're bringing my high down because every time I have to hear one of your stars speak out, it's about a political thing when I normally would go to Disney to escape the fact that there's politics going on around me, right? So I do think that now there's a big section of the population out there that is conservative and does feel like Disney, all of these messages are more progressive leaning than conservative. I would say I tend to agree with them in terms of it being more skewed that way. I don't have as much of a problem as they do with it, right? But yeah. I'm just saying it is skewed that way. You're not hearing somebody say like, yeah, this movie was about how bad the Obama administration was. You don't hear that. You hear about how it's Trump and it's this and that. So the PR machine, and I think it was really eye-opening to me to see how Star Wars handled the PR. So what happened with Star Wars PR? And I used to follow the Star Wars account and unfollow them because of this, because I just felt like it was getting so toxic in its responses to certain types of tweets or certain types of messages in the marketplace. But basically, you had a horrific segment of the population that wanted to bully Kelly Marie Tran about her role in The Last Jedi. And then Star Wars officially said, like, we don't like the bullies. I felt like that was fine. Support your actress. Kelly Marie Tran is great. We want to support Kelly Marie Tran. But then what started happening was really weird. Not only did they do that, which I felt like was fine and appropriate, then they started going and they started picking fights on Twitter with people who were more conservative leaning, and they started showing an immense amount of support to people who were super progressive leaning in their podcasts and things like that. And I thought to myself, why would you do that to a fandom that is already at each other's throats? Why would you enter the sphere? It'd be like if I knew that behind the scenes, OG and George were mad at each other because we talked before the show, and OG was like, "Oh man, George, you're too cool. Your necklace is too cool. You got to take off your necklace because I don't look cool enough." And I come on the show and I'm like, "Hey George, how about that necklace?" You know what I mean? Like it's like that's what Disney felt like they were doing. It was like you don't need to take these two factions that are at each other's throats in the fandom. You don't need to insert yourself and go, "We're with Team A, fuck Team B." I mean, that's like a crazy thing to do in my mind from a PR perspective, right?
Oh yeah.
And so I just keep seeing that over and over and over again with Disney PR. It's like when Iger used to go out and speak, I used to think to myself, this dude has the cleanest speeches that I've ever heard. He'll get a fastball, curveball, he'll get whatever, and he's nailing them out of the park every time he answers.
Right.
And now you hear him answer stuff, and you're like, oof. The writers are being unreasonable. Like, what? Wait a minute. Why did you say that? That's not a Bob Iger thing to say. He would have said something like, "We love writers. We think writers are amazing. We hope we come to a deal pretty quickly. But these are challenging times, and we're gonna have to put our best foot forward." It's not that hard. I mean, well, it can be really difficult. I shouldn't say it's not that hard. It can be really difficult, but it feels like there was a voice in his ear that is no longer there, and that is no longer with the organization as a whole. And that is so decentralized that people can say whatever they want to, and that is just not Disney to me. Why is Disney struggling so much with certain segments of the population? Because it's obvious to figure it out, because you're speaking to one segment of the population and you're not speaking to the other segment of the population. And by the way, you shouldn't be speaking to either. You should be speaking to everybody about your stories and how about your stories are amazing and how people should go engage with them. But I can rant about this for way too long, so please, George.
Disney could sometimes be their worst own enemy, especially when it comes to the PR. They look at the trends. They look at what's the hot topics for today's world news that they never used to, and it's like, okay, how can we get these people on our side that they won't come, breathing down our necks when it really wasn't an issue in the first place. It's like they create the spotlights on themselves, like you had mentioned about the Splash Mountain. Now, as I said, if they wanted to eventually down the road change it to Tiana's, absolutely fine, or something else, what have you. But the regular normies didn't really even know what was even behind Splash Mountain. But Disney put themselves in that position by showcasing it to everyone, saying, okay, this attraction is problematic. Here's what we're going to do about it. It's like, if you're just going to do it, then just nonchalantly do it. You don't have to have a title as to why you're doing it, whether one way or the other.
And the timing was very much a problem too. Is like Jay was saying, right in the middle of the Floyd stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, look, when Iger said they were going to change, they had plans to change Splash Mountain for years. I believe him, because it was even Michael Eisner who put the movie Song of the South away, where you couldn't buy the movie even under Michael Eisner. So this has been an issue at Disney for a long time. So when Iger says, we've kicked around some ideas, for years, I totally believe him. Yeah. But the timing of the announcement, it was clear they didn't really have a fleshed out plan for this attraction when they announced it. They rushed out the announcement because of politics. You know what I'm saying? Just do it, but you don't have to,
Exactly. And who's behind that is the Disney PR. And that was right at the time when Iger was jumping ship and giving the helm to Chapek. And I feel like that is where all the PR mess kind of began. And you could even use that same argument with the Reedy Creek district. It was like the PR team jumping down Chapek's neck of saying, oh, say this, say that, and he did, and then look what happened. It's like, oh, well, you shouldn't have said that. And it's like, well, you just told me to. And it's so it's like to save their own skin. It's like, there were a lot of issues, and again, it's sometimes where a lot of people don't know is when you have a main figure that is ahead of a major world corporate company and they say statements. They have a team that's backing them up. It's not just them waking up and say, you know what, I think I'm going to go out on a podium and speak this out of my mind. No, they have notes, they have rehearsals, they have rundowns, they have everything before they even go out and make that statement. So it's definitely, as much as, Bob Iger has to be held accountable, for his mess ups. Chapek is accountable for his mess ups. At the end of the day, we're all human. We do mess up. Sometimes you have to be very careful, but it definitely stems to the core of the PR at Disney right now, which is a complete utter mess.
Yeah. It does. It's a PR, it's a messaging, because it's like this. For example, diversity is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Learning about other cultures and trying other foods that you're not familiar with and experiencing life from another perspective is a beautiful thing and should be celebrated 1000%.
And has been at Disney for decades.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And the difference.
And really quick, OG, I don't want to interrupt you. And it's also how it is presented, how it is taken by, like, for instance, like we were just talking about Pixar. My all-time favorite Pixar film is Coco. Beautifully done, beautiful music, beautiful storyline, character, the background of what for the Hispanic community, what it means for family and loved ones, and so they focused on that to just say, let's tell a great story. Right. It's not let's tell a great story by adding all these political messages of what today's world is talking about today. But sorry, brother, go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, here's the thing. It's like, okay, so yeah, with Coco, you're right. It was just, we're going to tell a beautiful story, and it happens to be a story based around Mexico, right? Okay, cool. But the messaging now, or I think they're kind of getting out of it a little bit, but like recently, it was more about, like, for example, Captain Marvel. It was like, okay, like, the strong female thing, and it's a female superhero. That was the marketing around her being a woman. It's like, you don't need to do that, Disney. Just, she's a badass. She's a female. We all know she's a female. We can see, we have eyes. Just let her be a badass superhero. You don't need to market it as, oh, she's a woman. That's when it becomes a little tacky, in my opinion. Yeah. It's like, the first, this or the first that. It's like, you don't need to do that. Just look, when like Jay said, they've been doing pretty inclusive stories for a long time now. Under Michael Eisner, we had Pocahontas, we had Mulan, we had all kinds of stories that were that broke away from that white European sort of thing.
If it's strong, it'll speak for itself.
Well, yeah, and you don't need to market it as like, when Mulan came out, it wasn't marketed as like the first Chinese, animated film by Disney. You don't need to do all that. Just, we all know it's Chinese. Like, it's cool like that. We don't need to know. Don't market it like that. And that's where the PR comes in. It's like, okay, it comes off tacky. And then you kind of trigger like the conservatives, right? Because then it's like, oh, well, it's like identity politics. Mm-hmm. Just do the movie. If you want to do a movie about Colombian culture, do a movie about Colombian culture. You don't need to market it though as such or whatever, and make a big to-do about it, and that's where they really get themselves in the hot water. Now, are they trying to get out of that? I think so.
It seems like it.
It seems like it. It seems like they're trying to moderate, but this is like a knot now that they have to untie, and it becomes a major, major issue.
Yeah, they're a little behind the eight ball on it. I mean, I don't want to pick on the Tiana thing too much, but just let me give a little context to how I saw that. Tiana is my favorite princess. We talked about this the other day. Somebody asked us on the show. They said, who's your favorite princess? Tiana is my favorite princess. Why is Tiana my favorite princess? Because Tiana's story is about entrepreneurship and about saying, I want to do something creative and cool with what I've been given, and I'm going to work really hard at it. I love that story. Love Princess and the Frog. So, for me personally, when they started announcing Princess and the Frog, I thought it was cool. I'm not one of the people that's like, I must have Splash Mountain stay around. Do I like Splash Mountain? Yeah, Splash Mountain's fantastic. But if I look at it from a standpoint of a business standpoint, I think to myself, okay, Tiana is a princess that you can still make money off of. Splash Mountain is something that's very difficult to make money off of. Why? Because of its connotation of Song of the South, which is, by the way, not for sale by the Walt Disney Company. You cannot go buy it somewhere. You can't buy it in a store. What can I still buy? Princess and the Frog. I can go own Princess and the Frog. We go on the ride with I don't have kids. If I had kids and I go out with my nephew and my niece and we go on the ride and they go, wow, Tiana's amazing. Guess what I can do? I can buy Tiana merch, right? I can go buy a Tiana dress for my niece. I can go, buy the movie, have them take it home with them. They can spend more money on that thing. So from a money standpoint, it makes sense. From a story standpoint, I love that story. Fantastic. I'm happy about it. But when you start to engage in the identity politics of where culture is kind of moving, you have two problems. The first problem is that you're not supposed to be involved in the identity politics because you would like your market to be as inclusive as possible. And as soon as you start picking a team, and then we're really great these days at making teams that hate each other. As soon as you pick one of those teams, the other team goes, whoa, wait a second. Are you not on our team? And then you go, no, we're picking that team. Well, then guess what? You've lost audience, which means you've lost money, which means you're not going to have people show up and pay for things. So the point I'm trying to make is Disney is supposed to say, we welcome all teams. There's some things that we don't welcome. Bullying our actresses, totally get that. Can't do that. But we welcome all the different teams because we're not about this whole fight. We're about bringing people together. We're about making this as inclusive as possible, not exclusive. And so when they start doing that and they're not very articulate with the way that they do it, it just seems to me that I'm just sitting back and observing it and being like, it doesn't feel like you have a plan for talking about how great your stories are in a context where everybody who hears, not everybody who hears that plan, but a large majority of people who hear that plan goes, that's cool. I want to be a part of that. And I don't know why they're letting culture dictate what they do as opposed to letting their own plan of what they want to occur to dictate what they did, like the 2010s. It just doesn't make any sense to me. The second problem, so that's the first problem, is that you alienate part of your marketplace. The second problem is what culture thinks is appropriate shifts. What culture thinks was appropriate 50 years ago is not what culture thinks is appropriate today. And so if you're trying to be on the right side of history, that's a guessing game because you don't know where 2 decades down the road we're going to be. So to me, it feels like it's like just stay out of. For those of us who love Disney, I think one of the reasons we love it is because we get to immerse ourselves in stories that have a meaning but are also entertaining. And we don't need you to hit the nail on the head about which political party you're actually trying to benefit. And I hope that they're able to steer back towards the right, not the right political party, steer back towards the correct way of kind of getting their stories out there. So we can,
it's kind of like this, right? To kind of put it like in like to an analogy, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
If you have 2 people, right? Mm-hmm. So you have one dude here who's like every day he's bragging about how many friends he has that are like, black and Hispanic and stuff. Right. I got this many friends that are black and this many friends that are Hispanic, right? You have that guy over there. And then you have the guy over here who he's friends with people. He doesn't talk about it. These are just his friends. Like this guy happens to be black. This guy happens to be Filipino. It's all good. But he doesn't talk about it. He's just friends with them. It's organic, Yeah. Which person seems more
genuine?
Right, exactly. It's the one who's just, he's friends and it's just, they happen to be who they are and it's all good. The one who's constantly advertising it seems fake. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of what I feel like with Disney PR, that's kind of where it comes off as. When you're announcing it to the world, first this, first that, first this, it feels pandery and it feels very, it doesn't feel very genuine, right? Go ahead, George.
Yeah. Really quick, I want to ask you both this question. And OG, I think I know your answer because you touched upon this several times on the show, but definitely jump in, brother. But Jay, now you had mentioned like as far as like leaning, towards one side, Disney right now leaning more towards one side than the other. The type of person that Bob Iger is, do you necessarily feel like it's not necessarily of picking sides politically? It's just which one is the one that's in the hot market right now. So in the sense, for an example, that say the conservative side starts to become more of the widespread where it's like, okay, things are changing back, things are starting to tight up. Could that then lean Bob Iger to lean more towards that side, not because of the political race, so to speak, but just for the notion to say, hey, they're the hot ticket right now, and I have to jump on that train. So do you feel like that could necessarily be the notion where it is political, but in Bob Iger's eyes, it's not really political. It's just who is the popular one at the moment.
Yeah, okay, this is a really good question. And I think that if we go back in time again, we're going to get on a time machine again. If we go back to, especially if you think about like in my lifetime, right? So I'm in my early 40s. My birthday's on Monday, by the way.
What?
I'm going to be turning. Yeah, I'm turning another year ahead. Getting more gray in my beard. If you go back in my lifetime, the country was not as divided as it was, and when we had Obama in office was probably the time in my life, because I was now Reagan was in office when I was a real young kid, so I don't really remember him in office or remember his speeches. He was a fantastic speech maker. Then we go through the Bush eras, not fantastic speakers, right? Like they're just kind of like, they're kind of good old boys, if you will, but they're not like good, not great speakers. But Obama was that kind of person. He was like the Democrat version of like Reagan, from what I can tell, right? Clinton was a really good speaker too, even though his policies have been shown to be pretty poor overall.
Speaking of bad PR, huh? Bill Clinton.
Dude, let's not get into the conspiracy theories, because for one, we don't want that heat on us, right? Like, we don't want to be Epstein over here. The way that dude was killed in prison, some people think it was the Clintons, but who knows? That's an allegation. That's a what do you call it? Allegedly. I'm not promoting that, Bill. I don't need your heat. But yeah, so you had this idea that the country was being led by someone who was really intelligent, spoke really well, first black president in the history of the United States, phenomenal achievement. And I think a lot of people thought to themselves, this is the harbinger of what it means to be America. We are going down a very progressive road. Let's continue this. Let's keep this momentum going. I promise I'm going to answer your question, George. I'm just thinking about this in these kind of terms. And I think what happened was you had people that were just massive in Hollywood, like Bob Iger, who went, yeah, this is a great road to go down. And I think that I can see kind of where everyone's going, and the political landscape sort of matched the tech landscape, which then also matched the entertainment landscape. And all of these prevailing powers were kind of like, yeah, we're all going the progressive route. San Francisco's leading the tech charge. DC is leading the political charge. These are very progressive states. We got Texas behind us because that was the Bushes. We're not dealing with them anymore. And what I think that they didn't realize, I don't think most of the nation realized, was that there was this very underserved portion of the nation who was like, you guys aren't speaking for us. So I think what happened is that because those three major groups, tech, politics, and entertainment, were sort of all riding this same wave of being progressive, it was easier for people like Bob Iger to say, because Bob Iger doesn't control everything. He gives a direction and he gives a vision, and then people fill that in, right? And I think what happened was he started to hire people who shared a more progressive leaning ideology because they thought that the nation was going that way.
Right.
And so when that happened, I think that they started producing more and more content that was of that variety, so to speak. And they started getting more and more confident that that's what people liked. And I think what happened was when we saw in 2016, we saw the Trump campaign just completely take off. It was because I couldn't believe it, to be honest with you. Like, I thought like Hillary's going to win this. Like, there's not because, just for the sake of everyone understanding where I'm at, I'm super moderate. So I can't stand any of the politicians because I'm like in the middle on everything. So I'm like annoyed by both parties all the time. But my thinking was, well, the tech firms, the politics of the day, the entertainment of the day is all telling me that it's going to be Hillary. So I'm believing that it's going to be Hillary because that seems what's natural. And yet there was an undercurrent in American society going, you haven't represented us, and now we have to choose a more extreme example of somebody who we want to try and get back into the politics of the situation. And so I think that created a lot of destabilization in those different companies. You've seen tech companies move to Texas. It's a huge move that a lot of tech companies have made, specifically to Austin. You've seen the political parties shift so that they're just very There's a lot of vitriol between them, and a lot of people who moved out of California or moved out of a more liberal leaning state moved to conservative places, and now those conservative places are like really dominating in some of the political things that they're trying to accomplish. Why am I saying all of this stuff? Because what I think happened was Bob Iger was lulled into a situation where he thought this is the direction that we're going. Kind of like that stool I talked about earlier.
Right.
Customers want more progressive things. The marketplace is, generally speaking, getting more progressive. Our competition is also doing, let's not forget, the competition is also doing more progressive things. It's not like it's just Disney who's doing it. And so he got lulled into this sense that like this is the marketplace. What he didn't realize or didn't see coming or wasn't paying attention to, because I think a lot of us were lulled into that kind of situation, was that there was an underlying current of like, wait, you guys are doing stuff that doesn't represent me. I'm not saying that about myself. I'm saying that about the MAGA supporters, the Republicans who are out there. And because I'm moderate, by the way, I have friends all across the spectrum, and I upset them all the time. They upset me all the time. I don't care. It's fine. I will be your friend no matter where you sit with that. I think that's where it's actually coming from, George. It was like he put people in positions thinking that the marketplace was going a certain way.
Yeah.
They went too far with that, and now he's going to be like, now what I think he's saying is, it doesn't really matter what I believe, because the thing that I'm on the hook for is a stock price and earning money. And so it's not that his political beliefs will change necessarily. It's that his beliefs about how to run a company that makes more money are changing. And he's going, we got to pull all of this back. So that's kind of where I would hang out with it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think these as people say, woke decisions are completely. I think it's so much more based, and I think you touched upon this too, Jay. Like, I think it's so much more based on the money. They think that that's where the direction is, so we're going to follow the current, and that's going to lead to more a giant bag of money, right?
And it's all about the money, OG.
It's all about the money. Hold on one second. We'll drop the money drop. We haven't dropped it yet, so we got to do at least a money drop. Here we go. We'll do it, Jenny.
I got my mind on my money and my money on my mind. Yo, it ain't really work if you're proud.
There we go. It's all about the money, right? But here's the thing. Here, full disclosure, right? So in 2016, I was a total Bernie bro, right?
Occupy Wall Street, dude.
Exactly.
OG's out there. Yeah.
No, I was supportive of that too, actually, Occupy and all that stuff. So I was pretty progressive, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I remember, because it was like my fandoms sort of crossed, right? Where it was like Bernie and Bob Iger would get at it publicly. Like, Bob Iger was not a fan of Bernie Sanders. He publicly, there's YouTube videos of this stuff. He was going after Bernie. Like, how many jobs have you created, Bernie? Yada, 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 and all this stuff. Iger was much more like that conservative, like that more like Hillary Clinton kind of Democrat, right?
Right.
So he wasn't like, this is the thing, when I see a lot of like the conservatives and all these YouTube channels or whatever say like, oh, Bob Iger's woke. He really isn't that woke. He was very much like a Hillary Clintonite back in the day, much more middle of the road. He wasn't a Bernie guy. You know what I'm saying? What happened was, and when Jay touched upon, is that the woke thing became trendy, and he thought, oh, okay, he saw dollar signs.
Yep.
Now, the evidence of this being the case is how they market stuff in like China. Right.
Yes.
Which isn't progressive at all. And when they do, like when they promote Black Panther and they have to hide Chadwick, behind the mask and all that, like, terrible stuff. But like you can tell Disney isn't a progressive woke company at its heart. They will become that if they think that that'll that you'll give them more money because of it. Yep. But
they're willing to play ball.
They're willing to play ball with it. And you see it based on how they market things in the US, how they market things in China and other places in the world. So yeah, I don't think it's Bob Iger isn't a woke guy necessarily trying to push his ideology. He just saw, like in 2020, hey, this movement is hot right now. Let's ride that train and make that money, basically. Yeah. And now you're seeing it's not so hot anymore. And what are you seeing? A pullback. He's starting to moderate now. We're getting, trying to get the politics out and trying to get more, middle of the road. What are your thoughts on this, George? What's going on, man?
Yeah, that's well, first off, Jay, thank you for answering my question.
Sorry it was 15 minutes.
Next time I need a little more details and specifics.
Exactly.
No, I'm right there with you both. I feel like Iger is, again, just kind of how he has to live up to his name and have his legacy that he, in his mind, is the greatest CEO of the Walt Disney Company since sliced bread, So he wants to continue that trend. So it's like, again, whatever is the hype at the moment, he will jump on that bandwagon, and he'll do whatever he can to become part of that spotlight. And then when that spotlight dulls down and it goes to something else, there's a new fad, there's a new topic, there's a new situation, he'll jump onto that to make sure that his name is tied to the company, that he drove the company to those decisions. And it's like, we're going to be everybody's friend. We're all just going to sit around a campfire, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya. Well, it's like, and then sometimes when you do that, where you try to get everybody on your side, then nobody is on your side.
Right.
So that's
it's like when you try to ride the middle lane or the middle of the road, you hit by both sides, basically. You're not pleasing anybody. Yeah, sometimes
which is basically the California freeway.
Yeah, right. Exactly, exactly. No, it's interesting though. It's very, very interesting, and how the PR stuff all ties into this. I kind of feel like, honestly, I feel like this like the spark that kind of started all of this. And I hate to do this, but I kind of feel it was Lucasfilm that sort of started this whole mess back in 2017 with kind of like The Last Jedi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like that was the first instance of that was the first crack in this whole thing, and then it started. It was kind of isolated into Lucasfilm, but then it started to spread. Yeah, and here we are.
Well,
but
if you look across at the different entities under Disney too, it does feel like Disney was the least pusher of progressive content, to be honest with you, because you could say Pixar went with some like the Turning Red, which I've talked about, the subtle messaging in that's very progressive. You saw Lucasfilm for sure go full into it, which again, I would say from a content perspective, Star Wars wasn't like going the wrong direction so much as it was from a messaging perspective. And that's the clear delineation that I usually make on these things. Just let the content, like you said, OG, let the content stand for itself. You don't need to tell me about what the content, how I'm supposed to perceive it. You know what I mean? Right. Like, if you don't think Captain Marvel's the most badass female you've ever seen, then you're an asshole. It's like, wait a minute, like, just let her be the most badass female. You don't have to tell me,
Right.
And I think that once you have, if you have a PR function where some of the decentralized components start to speak out, let's talk about this. Disney loses when teams of people or audience groups decide they don't want to spend money at Disney. But Brie Larson does not necessarily lose, or Rachel Ziegler does not necessarily lose the way Disney loses, because a lot of times people will use their political kind of cachet to attract more of an audience to themselves. True. An audience that they may not have gotten otherwise, because they were only going to get there. Let's just put it this way. Brie Larson is probably more famous for being Captain Marvel than she is for being an actress working in Hollywood at some level, right? That's nothing against Brie Larson. I have nothing against her. I'm just saying the Marvel brand is giant and global, right? And the Brie Larson brand is not that. It wasn't before that, at least. But she still has to make money. She still has to get hired for jobs. She still has to get followers on Instagram. What are some of the ways that she can do that? I'm going to go speak out, and I want to go for my agenda, so I attract my audience to me, so that when the Disney job goes away, I've still got an audience, and I can still make deals. I can still show to Hollywood that this audience is with me. I think the same thing is true for any performer. So when one performer starts saying, "I'm going to go ahead and do that for myself," then all the other performers, if Disney doesn't put a clamp down on it, can do the same thing. They can go, "Oh, right. Yeah, I'm going to use this my way too."
And that goes to the same argument for Disney child stars. You have the child actors on the Disney Channel. They're perceived as this these characters that they play for many years, and then it's like when they grow up they lose their fan base, and it's like, and Disney can't do anything with them because they're at a certain age, you know, and it's like then the actors themselves want to get out of that squeaky clean kind of Disney bubblegum image. So what do? They go for hard, edgier type of roles, but then when the audience looks at it and the followers of them and they say, oh my gosh, how could they go from this to now that, and then they lose that audience, but then they gain another whole audience. It's like, wow, you know, they really came far, like from going as a Disney child actor to now this badass actor, and it's like I really like this new image of them. So it's like, so yeah, I definitely agree with you, Jay. It's almost like you have to separate the actor from their job roles as to oppose being connected to the company itself.
And it's interesting you bring that up, Jay, where it's like you have like the actress or the actor kind of like advocating for their brand, and it might run contrary to what's best for like a studio, you know.
Exactly.
That's interesting. I never really thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. And it's interesting too how, you know, Rachel Ziegler was just in that Hunger Games movie.
Yeah, that's right.
And I didn't see much. I feel like I've heard more like controversial statements in regards to the Snow White thing, which is like a long ways out, than I have when she was on the press tour for this Hunger Games thing. It's like, so it's interesting because it's like, does she feel more comfortable? Because is it a Disney title that she can say this stuff? Like, why wasn't she saying it with the Hunger Games? It's interesting.
Well, you saw the same thing. I pointed out to you guys when Haley Bailey, right after she'd finished The Little Mermaid. I think The Little Mermaid was coming out on streaming, and she was posting bikini pics, right? And you're like, well, now you could make, now I say that not to, I'm not trying to shame her, by the way. That's not a statement of shameful for her where she shouldn't be doing it. But what I am saying is it's pretty surprising to me that Disney, who wants her to look like the Little Mermaid, is not more involved with what she's doing to post pictures that are clearly more excuse me, sexualized in nature.
Right.
So Disney probably doesn't want that, but her brand probably does, because what's she thinking? I don't want to be pigeonholed into doing kids movies for the rest of my career.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that it's like, if there's this delicate balance of like, I don't think you would have seen that with old school Disney PR as much. You wouldn't have seen, like, they tried to cover it up when their actors would get involved in stuff that wasn't good.
Walt Disney was a real stickler with this, like with Annette Funicello, and she would, right, like she couldn't show her belly button and the whole thing. And I understand it was like the 1950s or whatever, but it's the same kind of idea. But I will say this in terms of Halle Bailey, Halle, as a guy, I fully support you and your
I just think it's interesting because it does feel like, and social media is a giant part of this problem, right? Like the more we see in social media, the more the lives of the celebrities are revealed. I mean, excuse me. I really wish I can get over this cough. There's, even if you look at the Jonathan Majors situation that just recently went down, right? I mean, Disney was kind of like, well, we'll kind of see what happens with the charges. But it took about 2 seconds for Disney to be like, 2 misdemeanor. I mean, those misdemeanor charges, I don't know if you have gone in to look at the misdemeanor charges. The misdemeanor charges, I'm not saying he's justified by any means, right? He should not have done that. He was in a bad situation. But if you look at like what the charges that he got were, they're crazy minor compared to what he could have gotten, right? Totally. So the law has said, yeah, it's a little bit of a slap on the wrist. You're not going to jail or anything. It's like, just, you know, you shouldn't have done that. And Disney goes, not Kang anymore. You're gone, buddy. Like, so Disney is again playing with this PR kind of function of like, what are we doing here? We're going to react instead of being on the forefront of it. We're going to see what other people say. We're going to watch what Twitter says. Twitter's pissed off and says, Jonathan Majors is guilty. Drop him immediately. You know what I mean? Like, it's really wild. I just feel like it'd be nice if Disney were to step forward and say, look, this is our brand. This is what our brand is about. And we're going to consistently hold people to this. And if they don't hold to it, we reserve the right to not work with them anymore. And that could be little minor infractions that are like just social media infractions or whatever.
Well, it's like a lot of picking and choosing too, because
Yeah,
it's even
it
like
is.
the allegations with the court cases between Johnny Depp and
Amber Heard.
her, where he ended up, in a sense, coming out on top, and where it could have been much worse, than what the final verdict could have been. But it's like now it's like you can see Captain Jack Sparrow in the parks. You could see
Right.
him on merchandise, but it's like you don't necessarily now in today's time correlate and tie Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow. It's just Captain Jack Sparrow.
And you know what's interesting too is, and Jay, you talked about this reactionary, and it's very reactionary. It really screams to me like a lack of confidence on Disney's part, right? Like they're with the Jonathan Majors thing, for example. It's like, oh, we got to get rid of him right away. What's Twitter gonna think?
Exactly.
Or we got to make this move because what's Twitter gonna think? It's like this very reactionary. Like it's not coming from a place of like confidence, like a core. Like when you have confidence in your brand and you know what your brand stands for, and you make decisions from that kind of standpoint, it comes off different than what Disney's doing.
Correct. Like for example, a confident Disney brand would have said, we really don't like the allegations against Jonathan Majors. We wish him the best. Obviously, he's innocent until proven guilty. But for the sake of our brand, we're going to part ways with him before the trial even starts. But what do we see them do? We saw them wait until the charges came down. They were like, okay, we're going to wait till see what Twitter says. Okay, Twitter doesn't like it. We better put out the big flag that says he's gone because he's a dirtbag. And it's like, okay.
Which I remember when Disney was like, they were the Mel Gibson in Braveheart, so to speak. Like they were the ones that were like leading the charge and everything. Now it's like they just take a backseat, and it's like even with other companies, it's like we'll wait and see what Universal does. We'll wait and see what even Six Flags does. We'll wait and see what Warner Brothers does, what Paramount does. It's like make the decision that's best for your company at the time and not just be the follow-up guy
and Universal is brilliant at this. I mean, they're able to maneuver this much better than Disney. Look, they had Brie Larson in the Fast X movie. And there was like zero controversy. They didn't promote it like, oh, Brie Larson's in this or whatever. It was the way they went about it, and they flew right under that radar. And they just handle it. They just at least lately have been handling it so much better.
They flew under the radar with the Reedy Creek stuff and the Don't Say Gay bill. They flew under and then they're also really good at making fun of Disney when Disney steps in it. And they'll just be like, they'll send out a tweet that's like, and I think that now they have a unique position. If Disney did that kind of stuff, we would all say, what are you doing, Disney? Like, it's almost like you're punching down, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like, so we would all be like, don't do that. So we're not, what none of us are saying, I don't think, is that Disney should be more like Universal's PR. Disney should do what Disney thinks is best for Disney. Like the reason we all love Disney is because Disney has been meaningful to us in our lives. And we've had shared experiences there with friends and family that have been really beneficial to us. We've seen movies that Disney's put out that made a difference to us. We want that. We want Disney to be confident in that and have a vision for what that looks like and pursue that, as opposed to being like, what does George think about our decision today? Right? Like, it's just not how you should run your company.
No. And you're Universal...
Disney, there are some things. Do you really want to know?
Right, exactly. But even with this recent like ad pull from Twitter, right, with Elon and all that, all these companies, there was like probably 15 or 20 companies that did this, including Disney and Universal. And like Universal, it was like 4D chess, man. They basically did the same thing that Disney did. They both of these companies pulled their ads from Twitter, but you had every single pundit on CNBC talking about what's going on with Disney pulling the ads and Elon and this war, Elon versus Disney. And it's like the masterful way they weave that together. When it really, Universal did the same thing, but you wouldn't know that. They sold it as a Disney versus Elon thing, and they sold it, and it was convincing.
Exactly.
It was completely convincing. And that's where the PR, to come full circle, That's why it's important. You got to be able to. And then Bob Iger, I say it so many times. I don't know why. I even tag Bob Iger on my tweets with this because I hopefully he comes across it or something.
Yeah.
I don't know why he does not. Why does he keep walking into the trap on CNBC every time? You have ABC News. Go. What's that guy, David Murr or something? Go over there. Why go to ESPN or something? Why are you going over to enemy territory in CNBC, setting yourself up so they can clip your little answer and put it out there and totally make a problem for you? It makes no sense.
It's insane, and it also doesn't seem like he's prepared the same way as he used to be prepared. So it's just wild. It's just a very interesting time. I mean, I think, this is just, I'll say it this way. Am I criticizing Disney PR? Yes, but I'm looking at the results of what they're doing right now. The results are nowhere as good as they were in the 2010s. Right. They're dividing fandoms. The results are not what you want from PR. Okay. So this is not meant to. I had a one of the people I follow on X, who's super cool, kind of responded to me about when I put out my Disney PR tweet and was like, "What makes you say this? Like, why are you saying this about Star Wars PR?" And I'm like, "Well, look at the evidence." And he's like, "Yeah, you make a good case." He goes, I just have worked with some Star Wars PR people and they're really great. So this is not to say, hey, you people at Disney and PR, you're such horrible people at your jobs. I'm not saying that. I'm saying what you're doing now is not working, and what used to be done worked really well. How can you change your behavior to go back towards that and not towards the direction you're headed now?
And to add on to your statement, Jay, and I have to say this too, you have to know your craft. You have to know what you're doing, whether you're male, female, white, black, Korean, Native American, whatever. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what your political beliefs are, your religious beliefs. If you know what you're doing, that's all I care about at the end of the day. And it's like, if and I know we touched upon this earlier, it's almost like if I don't agree with a woman advocating for something, it's not because I'm anti-woman. It's not that I don't believe a woman should be out in the work field and have a voice. It's just I don't agree with what she is talking about. Or it may be in Amber Heard's case. It's not because she's a woman. I'm not a fan of her. I don't like her. I'm Team Johnny all the way. It's not because of choosing a guy over a woman. It's just women could be just as guilty of things as a man is, and vice versa. And it's like a guy can do whatever a woman can do, and a woman can do whatever a guy can do. As long as you know what the hell you're doing at the end of the day. That's all I care about.
So what you're saying is you would let Amber Heard poop in your bed, is what you're saying, George.
Basically, yeah.
Got it. Got it. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. Fascinating conversation today. Really, we dove into some really cool stuff. I want to thank you both for coming on and talking Pixar, talking Disney PR. The Italiano, if you can start us off, you could remind everybody where they could find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There it is. And down below, we got the one and only Jay Shear. Jay, if you could let everybody at home know where they could find you on social media, sir.
Yeah, if you're not mad at me for all of my analyses today. Follow me.
Is it hashtag cancel Jay?
Yeah, pretty much cancel Jay. You can follow me over on X at Jay Shear, just my name there. No space in between the two names. You can follow me on X. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me over at How Stories Work with Jay Shear. I just put out, my last video was a 47-minute video about David Fincher's The Killer. And I'm going to do a follow-up video on that too, because I put out this video. It's called The Killer Explained, What You Missed About The Killer. And then I put that out. And then I started watching some other people's videos about when they were explaining The Killer. And a lot of them did a really good job, except for I think that everybody's missing some really key points about the ending. So I'm going to do another video specifically about the ending and be like, I think we got to look at this a little bit more closely, because I think what they're saying is something different than what a lot of people think. So stay tuned for that video. There'll be the killer ending explained video coming out soon. And then, of course, I'd love for you guys to watch No Vacancy. It is my directorial debut, co-written by me and Nathan Sheck, and co-directed with Lucas Colombo, our DP. And by the way, a huge shout out to Lucas. He probably will never see this, but his mom just passed away, like literally 2 days ago, kind of unexpected. And my heart just goes out to him and his family. And he's part of the family of making content together, making movies together, and he's an awesome guy. So if you are the praying kind, pray for him. If you're the good thoughts kind of person, then send him good thoughts, because that's a devastating thing to go through. I've lost my mom, and it's not a fun situation.
That's
so yeah,
hard.
follow me on all of those places. Check out my content, or follow me right here on Orange Grove 55 on the Story Geek Show, which I'm sure we'll be having another show pretty soon here. George is the one that comes up with all the ideas these days. I don't even come up with ideas. I just wait for George to tell me what to do.
Now, Jay, before we go, you started Echo.
I did. I started Echo
today, right? I believe, or whatever you saw.
Did
you like what you saw so far, or yesterday? Did you like what you saw so far, or?
It's interesting. I fell asleep during the second episode, or after that, right after I sent that tweet, I fell asleep, which is not unusual for me. I fall asleep all the time and stuff.
Okay.
But I think that there's many things that are on the right track, but I'm not connecting with the way that it's being directed. It feels a little bit like, for example, I've done one short film, right? If you all of a sudden told me, great job on the short film, now go direct a big Marvel property, I would think that you would find some of it, especially depending on who I'm working with, you'd find some of it amateurish, because I just don't have the depth of having directed a bunch of movies that some other people have had. I feel a little bit that way with Echo. There's a lot of action sequences that feel like the hand-to-hand combat scenes are like fantastic. I think they're really, really good. Yeah. And then they're like there's one scene where there's like a train scene, and I'm like, this is not. Maybe it's the editing, maybe it's not the directing. I don't want to point any fingers without knowing what's going on, but it's not really like tension filled. It's sort of just like going through the motions. It feels like a little bit
like choreography, basically.
Yeah, feels like choreography, and like we just have to do this, so we're gonna do it, as opposed to like these are some really compelling, amazing moments.
Yeah,
there are compelling, amazing moments, but then it feels like we need to get to the next one, and I'm like, maybe just cut the show down in terms of its length and don't have those other ones.
Well, it's actually kind of funny, because the guys over at Bad Thoughts Podcast were kind of saying the same thing with the Percy Jackson series, where they said like the first 2 episodes were really good, and then by episode 3, it's like there's just so much into the episode in the short amount of time, and there's like not enough action. It's like they hype something up and then it falls short. And believe it or not, I think there was a scene in that show as well about a train. Maybe these writers need to stay away from trains. It's like
no trains.
Well, Disney Plus has an issue with that, though, because even with Star Wars stuff, like there's this inconsistency with the quality. Like when I watch a Netflix show, or even like, a show like Succession, it's very even Steven across the board. Like the quality and everything feels like it just goes along the way. With Disney shows like Book of Boba Fett, for example, or like what you're saying with the Echo one, it's very like there's super highs, like, oh my God, this is great. And then it dips way down, then super high. It's very inconsistent. You just don't know. Josh from Den of Nerds, we go through this with him too. Like he'll be watching these shows. He's like, "Oh man, that episode was fantastic!" And then the next one comes out, he gets on his live stream going, "What happened? Like, they shit the bed on this one." It's so like and
And
It's
I'm sorry,
crazy.
really quick before we go, because I know we're keep on going, but
Yeah.
Jay, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Proclaiming to that, like for like the episodes on Disney Plus, how there isn't really a consistency, how one episode could be 37 minutes,
Yeah.
then the next episode is 52 minutes, and then the
Right.
next one goes back down to 26 minutes. It's like, do you think that also hurts as far as like with the storyline goes, with the pacing, where if they were to just have to say, you know what, 45 minutes every episode, it'll just leak into the next episode, it would be more consistent. Do you think that's where a lot of the consistency
I
lapses?
think that plays a role for sure. That plays a role. But I think the biggest thing in my mind is it's usually a timing issue. It's usually that it's rushed. It's too fast. To me, I think that this is what's difficult, right? Like TV writers get in the habit of writing TV shows, and they get really good at writing TV shows. So that's why structure helps, because if you're a TV writer, you write really good TV shows. But if you're a movie writer, you structure movies really well, and you learn how to structure movies and what works and what doesn't, and when people get bored and when they don't get bored. When you are doing something that is a little bit more chaotic, what it feels like happens is that, one, you don't have enough time to do it, and two, it feels like to me that there's less studio either oversight or too much oversight to say it needs to be longer or it needs to be shorter, because we have to do 6 episodes, we have to do 8 episodes, we have to do 10 episodes. Why are you doing it this length? And that is kind of like, again, it's like, write what the story is, and how long is that story? Is it a 2-hour story, or is it a 6-episode story, or is it a 10-episode? Whatever the best possible story is, start there and then go. So that's where I feel like it's more the problem arises from. And I think, to your point, George, or to the point of the question, the lack of consistency does start to affect the overall quality, because the people involved are going like, well, do I remove this section of this episode because it's kind of gets slow, or do I just improve it and make it still 45 minutes the way I know how to do it because I'm a TV writer? You know what I mean? Like, I just think that they're lacking some things there.
Well, and to your point, Jay, you're right. When you have people that know you have people that know TV, they do TV. You have people that know movies, that do movies. Well, the issue with for example, Star Wars, is that Book of Boba Fett was going to be a movie. Then it was a series, and then it was a movie again, and then it was a series. Same with Kenobi.
Directed by Robert Rodriguez, a movie guy.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And the Kenobi thing was a movie, then it was a trilogy, then it was a show. So you're going back and forth, and I think in that process as well, it's all getting muddy and stuff, because it's not, when you do these projects, you have to map them out from the start as okay, this is a show. So you're going to map that out differently, like you were saying, as a show than you would as a movie. But when you're flip-flopping back and forth between these things, it's like it just causes all kinds of messes. And that's part of it.
I hate blaming the creatives too, because we don't really know what that creative is experiencing, right?
That's true.
We don't know if Disney's saying, yeah, you got to cut this, you got to cut that. I can tell you right now that if you told me all of a sudden on the set of my film, if all of a sudden you said to me, like, you got to make 10 more minutes of film, I'd be like, yeah, I got to do what? Like, what do you mean? Like, and if I were to do that, the percentage chance that would be bad additional content is very high. Like, because it's not what the story I was intending to tell was. The story I was intending to tell ended up being 24 pages, which is probably about 20 minutes. And that's what the story is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I hate to criticize the creatives, because it just feels like I don't know all of what's going on behind the scenes, but I think there's a lot more than we see.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the executives. I think when they're flip-flopping, I think between like movie and show, I think that's the higher up saying, well, actually, it should be a show. Well, actually, let's do a movie. And then the creatives are left holding the bag. Like, well, what am I going to do now? Now it's a show. Okay, now what do we do? It's like,
exactly.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
Exactly.
But guys, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody at home, thank you so much for watching. Comment down below with all your thoughts on everything we talked about today. Disney PR, the PIXAR layoffs, Disney Plus, all that good stuff. We would love to hear from you. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, everybody.